Welcome to Headbands and Handkerchiefs, where business buying banter meets no BS reality. Get ready to dive into the world of buying and selling businesses without the fluff and fancy jargon. We cut through the BS to bring you raw, unfiltered insights from industry experts, seasoned entrepreneurs, and no-holds-barred discussions that get straight to the point. Whether you're a seasoned business buying pro or a curious aspiring entrepreneur, this is where the real talk happens. Buckle up for headbands and handkerchiefs, because in business, there's no room for sugarcoating. Let's get down to the brass tacks.
Hello there.
There we are, Richard or Richie.
You like that, right?
I like Richie. You are
Yeah.
Richie to me.
Yeah.
now.
Okay. No, that's perfect. Say anybody who knows me for a long time when I was a kid, I was always Richie. Then I got a little
You
more,
have a
more
personality.
sophisticated. But I'm not any more sophisticated than I once was. Just the name got a little sophisticated. But yes, I am a Richie.
Yes, you are all day
All
long.
good. All
I I'm a Debbie Joe. If you want to know that,
Debbie Joe, J-O.
J-O. My middle name is
Debbie
Joe, but I go by Deb. You can tell somebody like Debbie Boone back in the day when I was born. Debbie was
Light
popular.
up my life. Yes.
You light up my life for
You light
sure.
up my life, right?
Popular wedding song back in the
That's
day,
right.
right? I
Yeah, I
could
think
probably
it
sing
was.
it. I could sing it for you, Richard.
Well, I wouldn't. You don't want me to sing it because I could ruin this whole show in a
Oh
nanosecond.
man. Happy New Year, my friend.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to you. Merry
Yeah.
Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy
Yeah.
Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate. Great. I hope you had a good holiday so far and having a good holiday so far.
That's right. It is a rather busy week with friends and family, but a little bit quieter on the business side. But we decided to keep the show rolling. Every week on Thursdays, 2 p.m. live. That's our mojo, right? That's what we're gonna do.
That's our mojo. That's our Deb Joe. Yes, and it's it's a quiet time, but on the other hand, quiet times generally in business, from a business buyer perspective, I always tell people it's a pretty good time because a lot of people jump out for a while, and so and you want to sustain your momentum while at the same time, you need to rejuvenate. So if you've been going pretty hard, you take the time off, and if you've been just jumping into it, it's a week to keep going. It's just hard because a lot of people are away and what
Yeah.
have you. But it's a nice time. I'm not, this week I'm sort of busy, but just not working too hard.
I also think a lot of dreamers are dreaming this week. And what I
Yes,
mean,
well, it's the New Year's resolutioners coming up, right?
oh yeah, and just anybody that's thinking of doing something different in 2024, and I always think, how about buying a business?
Right.
We all dream to want to either exit corporate America or in my opinion, sometimes keep corporate and buy an absentee business and diversify and safeguard from a potential loss, right, of income. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and people, hopefully, it's a time of year for most people. I know for myself it is. It's a good time to reflect and think about what happened during the course of the year, revisit some of your goals and where the outcome is and what you could do better and what some of the plans are, and put into place meaningful plans that you're going to execute. So you don't
That's
get
right.
into the you don't want to get into dieter syndrome, right? Where everything sounds great for the first 2 days of the year. And I think the stat is like 80% of people break their New Year's resolution by I think the 3rd or 5th day of January. So
Yeah.
having realistic but aggressive goals and
Mhm.
targets, are good, and it's a good time of year to assemble those. But
Yeah.
now the key is to stick with them.
Stick with them. That's right. Well, today's episode, we titled it Business Brokers, Friend or Foe. And I hope we have some business brokers that are going to join us today because they're probably curious to hear what we have to say about that. But you know what, Richard? We could probably change that title to SBA lenders, friend or foe.
Yeah, I mean, probably, in a lot of industries, certainly, and I'm with you. I certainly hope I'm just glancing to the right. So anybody who's watching, it's just I'm not getting deterred or sending texts or answering emails, but we get the list of people who attend on the right side of the screen. So I'm like with you. I want to see what our audience as far as business brokers, because I think what happens is, the really the better brokers are not. They understand the reality of the market because a business broker can't be exactly friend or foe.
Hmm.
The better brokers understand that there are a disproportionate number of brokers in the industry that probably shouldn't be in the industry, or heart isn't in the right place. I don't. I think the real good brokers, they're not offended at all. They understand the reality of it, and it's commonplace in a lot of commission industries and industries where there's a lot of turnover. Because for business brokers, it's I do business brokers. I've been doing it for 20 years. Then and do higher level intermediary work now, but understand it from all sides of the equation. And especially in the lower markets, it's a tough job, and it takes, you get on board, you probably go a year without earning any income, and
Hmm.
learn. And so that's why you have a lot of turnover. The real good ones who stick with it and make it a career, they'll understand that what we talk about from the negative side of things is they recognize it. So
Hmm.
I think that,
Yeah.
hopefully we'll get some good comments and feedback from any of those in the industry.
Would you say that small business brokers start small, and then would the good small business brokers start to travel up to like middle market intermediary work?
You do get some of that,
Hmm.
without question. I personally believe that the larger deals, I moved up very quick. I mean, when I started out in business broker, I was doing some deals like there were 60 grand, but I realized a couple things. First of all, there's a lot of shitty little businesses at that level, and people were investing their life savings to buy them. And even if I was representing a seller, I couldn't bring myself to watching someone, spend their life savings to buy a business. That wasn't good. There's a
Mm.
lot of lack of sophistication. I find, the process, the deals, they're no harder, in my opinion, to do a $5 or $50 million deal than it is to do a 50 or $500,000 deal. It's just more zeros, and in many cases, the larger deals are easier because you're dealing with more sophisticated people across the board. And I'm not saying anything disparaging against the sellers or buyers at that level. It's just what they've been exposed to, and so the resources, the people that are involved in the deal team on both sides, and the individuals themselves, the buyer and the seller, are generally more experienced, more sophisticated. So I find those deals, much easier to do. Some of the brokers do move up. Where
Mhm.
brokers, I think, get into a trap is it's a listing business, right? They're all brokers are taught, go get listings, go get listings. So if you
Yeah.
want to move out, you have a stable of listings, 5, 10, or 30 listings, whatever the number is. And it's like, well, I don't want to really give those up. Well, you got to give them up if you want to move up market, because they take a lot of time. So I think the
Mhm.
better ones, the smarter ones, to a large extent, move up. Yet there's others who really make a terrific living at the lower market. So
Mhm.
it's really, to me, if you could do deals at 100 grand, you could do them at a million. You could do them at million. You could do them at 10 million.
Mhm.
And I think, and just again, it's just my personal perspective and experience. I think the larger deals are easier, and I find them more
Yeah.
enjoyable.
And being on the lender side, many of my peers that were in SBA lending and still are today, they'll choose the larger deals over the smaller deals all day long just because they seem to be easier for them to work on. But there are very good buyers and sellers at a $500,000 clip.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
but I get that though. A lot of them don't want to deal because it takes the same amount of time and effort on a small deal versus a $5 million deal. But I was always one that didn't want to discount the small guys because there were some easy ones that flew through the system quickly. Um, Tell me this: as far as business brokers, when small business brokers, I'm talking about small businesses because there's the middle market. That's a
Yes.
different arena, but majority of the business brokers that are out there, they're out there fishing, just trying to get that listing, like you said, because they got to put food on the table and make an earning. Are they just taking anything, or are they saying no to some? Because why today do we still have so many listings that are represented by brokers that are not financeable? What?
Well,
Why?
well, it's also, besides just non-financeable, they're not closable, meaning they're never going to get sold.
Yeah.
So if you go back in time to the beginning of business brokerage, when Tom West started out, the agenda was go get listings, and that's really never changed. The better brokers, the more successful brokers, are certainly more selective, and it's a process. At the beginning, you take on a bunch of listings because you're learning the industry, but as a broker, the only thing you have to sell is your time, and it's the only asset you have. And so when the time comes that you want to end your career, retire, whatever, you have nothing to sell unless you've built a brokerage business. And so they get caught in this trap of taking on way too many listings, of this old wives' tale or folklore that, there's a buyer for every business. Because no, there's not. There's not a buyer for about 75% of the businesses because they're not good businesses. And so they get caught in this trap, and they certainly, in my experience, brokers generally take on way too many listings. The better ones don't. The better ones are more selective. I probably do more due diligence before I take a listing than the buyers do due diligence on the business, because you want to make sure it sells, because all you have is to invest is your time. And so I think your point is very well taken. Generally speaking, the answer is yes. Brokers take on too many listings, meaning too many businesses that are not going to sell. And it's a time suck.
Yeah. What do you think here of the comment that Sia put up for us here behind the scenes from Ed? Brokers who are competent are worth their price tag. Conversely, incompetent or lacking integrity brokers can do a lot of damage in a hurry. Wow.
Yes. Yeah. Well, he's spot on, because, there's also confusion. A lot of buyers believe, or inexperienced business buyers think, that a business broker is the business world version of a real estate broker who's going to sell you a house and take you to 30 different houses to show you every possible scenario and every property till you eventually buy one. Business brokers don't do that. Business brokers were completely different. The only thing they have in common with real estate brokers typically is the word brokers. Now, because so what happens is, first of all, you have that piece. So because business brokers don't do that, they're not handholders for the buyer, and so there's some misunderstanding. There's also, it's only, I think, about 17 states where there's co-brokerage. I mean, the listing broker will cooperate with another broker. And so there's confusion in the marketplace because buyers think, well, just go get a broker and they'll help lead me to the right business. No, the answer is the following. I look at it and say business brokers play a role in, three significant components relative to a buyer. They can provide you with access to businesses listed for sale. They can act as a buffer and be a deliverer of bad news to the seller, because chances are the buyer and seller are going to have to work together post transition. So they deliver the bad news, and they've done it before. So they understand the documentation and what it takes to get a deal to the finish line. They're not going to be, especially if they're paid by the seller, they're not going to dispense unbiased advice to the buyer in order to, that could jeopardize a deal. They're not your trusted advisor. They work for the seller, and also they have the role of getting it to the finish line. And, buyers shouldn't get caught. They can be very beneficial to the process, but an educated buyer should never be deterred if you happen to have a horrible broker in the middle of the equation. The buyer should know enough and be educated enough to know how to deal with all the various steps in the process. So even as Ed points out, they're right. Incompetent or lacking integrity brokers can do a lot of damage in a hurry. It's absolutely correct. So the buyer has to understand how they navigate the scenario, the process, if that type of broker is involved with the equation.
That's right. And I like to add, and thank you, Ed, for this great comment, but the same is applicable for SBA lenders. Incompetent SBA lenders definitely give a bad rap to this industry, that, oh my God, you want to buy a business? And a business broker will say, and you want to do SBA? That's going to take 6 months. Well, right, with an incompetent SBA lender,
Right.
It will take 6 months, but with the right experienced, credible SBA lender and the right credible business broker who knows how to get a seller side prepared, we're going to make music, and we're going to get that deal done in 45 to 60 days max.
Right.
That is beautiful.
That is beautiful. Right.
Yeah, and it can happen. The bad rap out there on all sides of the transaction comes down to preparation of both sides. And that's where we lack. I would say most business brokers are not prepared with the sellers with what we need to prove to the underwriter for financials and add backs. And most buyers that start their search don't even know what the heck they qualify for. And they're just listening to the advice of a listing broker who just wants to sell a business. And this buyer probably doesn't even qualify. So,
Right, right. And so it causes, it causes in those cases, and to Ed's question or point, can cause a lot of damage. And
Mhm.
so, when you look at this and the broker's role, and similarly an incompetent SBA lender, they can cause an equal amount of damage. One of the things that should be understood with all of this, that the good brokers are going to act with, and same with a good SBA lender, at the top of the list is they've got to act with integrity and transparency and be able to navigate or be a Sherpa to the seller, because typically the broker's representing the seller. And when I speak to this point, I've bought and sold 13 companies, made for myself, and made one co-investment. And I've, and I've always had a broker in the deal. I think, except for one particular deal, I've always had a broker represent me, and done brokerage, and been on both sides of the equation as a broker, and as a buyer and seller on both sides. And so one of the things that happens is you get these brokers, first of all, above all, if they provide complete transparency. And one of the things that
Mhm.
gets everybody into trouble is setting these bad expectations.
Mhm.
And so setting expectations to a seller of what a deal is going to look like, and setting wrong expectations when a buyer speaks to them, if they come to them and say, we want to get SBA financing or whatever that may, to explain to them that, it can be done, and not just go down the road, oh no, it takes too long, it takes 6 months, because it doesn't if you have the right lender. And also being able to convey reasonableness amongst the parties, right? If a buyer
Mhm.
has an offer, terms and conditions that are reasonable, they have to have the kahunas, the kahunas, to be able to tell the seller that it is reasonable, even though they may have an expectation of what a deal should look like, and it's gone a little sideways as far as terms and conditions. But to
Mhm.
be able to convey what's reasonable, similarly to convey what's reasonable to a buyer of what deal terms should look like and what they should expect to go into the SBA, because they're not
Yes.
going to, they want to go down the road of SBA financing. They have to understand that there's going to be some collateralization, and and what's going to be required in providing personal financial statements. So
Mhm.
when a broker is completely transparent to both parties and sets proper expectations and could provide them with the materials, and let them know what has to be done, they could move both parties down the road much more effectively.
That's right. Yes. Oh, and I see a comment here from Kevlin. Thank you, Kev, for joining the live today. Friend or foe is always a consideration, but should be more heavily vetted before investing time, energy, or resources or money. People are putting down deposits um, uh, with a listing broker, right? In order just to engage them, correct? Would I be right on that, Richard? That, if somebody wants to sell a business, they're putting a deposit down with the broker?
Not always.
Not
Depends.
always.
On
Okay.
the higher end, more investment banker type deals. Most of the investment bankers require upfront fee as a guarantee.
Mm-hmm.
I know, I don't take them because I work on a higher commission rate when I do, the deals. But there's a lot that's invested. Investment bankers put in hours and hours to get decks ready, and so I understand those upfront fees. In the lower market,
Mm-hmm.
typically there are no fees but a commission rate.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think the biggest thing that a seller has to do, to the point that was brought up, is vet the broker to understand, are they the right person? Because it's very easy to take a listing, throw it on a website like BizBuySell or businessesforsale.com, or the other ones, and just sort of just pray that, a qualified buyer comes in. But it takes more to understand the business, to learn the business, to market it properly, to put a proper deck together, to be able to vet every buyer. When I say vet every buyer, it's not just financial considerations, but be able to go through to learn the business. A broker should learn the business
Mm-hmm.
as
Mm-hmm.
well as anybody in the business except the seller, so that the broker is able to answer 90% of the questions that come in, and determine whether or not someone is not right or the business is not right for them before they even have to engage, between the buyer and seller. And so
Yeah.
doing a more detailed job of learning the business, as opposed to just take a listing, throw it up online for sale, it does everybody a disservice. Everybody, the seller, the buyer, and the broker. Learn the business. You could explain it better, and help everybody, the questions that are going to be asked, and be able to guide the seller accordingly as to what information they should provide, etc. Because you want to be completely transparent. But I agree to that point. Sellers need to vet the broker to make sure they're the right one.
That's right. Yes. And I recall back when I worked for banks as a direct SBA lender, some brokers would contact me to look at the tax returns of a listing that was coming in before it even hit the market and question me, Deb, what do you think? Based on what you see in the tax returns and the cash flow, what can this business afford for a price? And price is one thing, but we have to remember when we're selling businesses and when we're buying them, you have the price, but then there's also working capital that has to be included in the loan. The fees, the SBA guarantee fee, all the third-party fees are added back into the loan and credited back to the buyer at closing. So the loan cost and the loan amount does go up, which means there is a higher payment that needs to be supported by the historical cash flow.
Right.
So business brokers need to be cognizant of the fact that we're not just selling based on what the business owner that wants to retire needs to live on. We're selling the business based on what the business buyer's bank will approve and what the business can afford.
Right. Absolutely. And that's really backing into it, because sometimes what can be financed does not necessarily reflect the purchase price. And so the buyer has to understand there needs to be a bridge in place, potentially with seller financing or a lower price. Because, if a seller truly wants to sell the business and this deal is going to get financed, they have to understand that the price is going to reflect the money that's available for this buyer to execute the transaction, right?
Yeah.
It's just, you may think your business is worth $3 million, but if all the, if the valuations come in lower, or the buyer has less capital, or there's a smaller component of seller financing and it comes to $2.5 million and you want to sell your business, that's the number. I've said it here before, what a seller thinks their business is worth has nothing to do with the value. And so sometimes backing into it and understanding what can be financed, is the way to go. That can certainly determine the purchase price. Now, there's there's different terms that can be involved. You can get a little creative, but understanding how it's going to get financed is critical.
That's right.
There's a question, by the way, from David Vogel. It was a question or comment, and there was a question from David Munoz, which was, I think, dealing with what type of diligence can brokers do.
There you go. Can you see it, Richard?
Yes.
Go ahead and read that, and I'll let you take the answer on that.
What due diligence should be being done by brokers that aren't being done across the country? Well, it's a great question. I think the first thing obviously is related to the financials, make sure they understand them, but it's doing a real deep dive to make sure that the business there's a couple of key things, 3 things that we talked about in other shows that are important to sell a business, which is the condition of the financials, which a broker should be investigating and making sure all their questions are asked. I mean, certainly they should have enough training to know what questions a buyer is going to ask. The second thing is related to what problems there are in the business, whether it be customer concentration or, a lease due to expire or a license. Any key issues that keep a seller up at night are going to keep buyers up at night. And so the broker should be asking all of those questions, because a broker should table every concern to the buyer. Everything that could potentially be of concern to a buyer, a broker should disclose up front, because if the buyer can't deal with it, you might as well get rid of the buyer, and because they're never going to get to the finish line. And the third thing is, how well can the business transition? And that is determined by, the size of the buyer pool, but understanding what does it take to operate the business, what things can be done. Very often, and especially in the smaller end, businesses aren't ready to be sold. And so part of the due diligence by a broker is digging in and say, hey, there's either people that are needed, there's process that are needed, there's systems that are needed, there's changes that are needed. And the broker is far better off to tell the seller, look, let's work on this for the next 6 to 12 months, and then we'll take the business to market. So it is more sellable. So those are all pieces of a due diligence, and a broker should adapt to, put on a buyer hat. Say, hey, if I was looking to buy this business, what would I be looking at? What would be of concern to me? And work with the seller. Because if you have a nice, trusting relationship, they're not going to let you help them put the plans in place to get the business more sellable and then hire someone else, because you have a good relationship with them. So you're better off to take a step back and spend the time necessary to get those things into place to make the business more sellable. So that's the due diligence.
And sometimes 6 to 12 months is nowhere near enough.
Yeah, right.
Right? I mean,
True enough.
that's right. Banks want to see. I mean, I know of one non-bank lender that will consider financing a business acquisition transaction as long as the most recent year fits the debt service cash flow and year to date. That's pretty good. So
Yeah, that is good.
that is good. Now, that's not common, but I
No.
know who that lender is. And if I need to go to that lender, that's where I'm going. But then there's others that want the previous 2 tax filed business years to support the loan project and current year. Then there's other banks that want 3 years plus year to date.
Right.
Then there's banks that take the average of the 3. So what I'm trying to share with our audience here is every single bank has a different method to their madness of how they calculate if the business can afford the loan project or not.
Right. Yeah, and
And
you know, my experience was typically around 3 years, and because each lender varies, as you pointed out, a buyer should be well aware that early on, and it's incumbent upon a broker, if this deal is going to go the route or potentially can go the route of of SBA financing, they need to do that homework early. When I say they, the
Yeah.
broker needs to do that homework early. They should be shopping it. You know, the idea. You know, I don't know if there's, you know, I think some lenders pay fees or referral fees to some brokers. I think that's
Mhm.
still allowed to be done, which is ludicrous to me.
Mhm.
However, you know, it's incumbent upon a broker, and it just makes good business sense, is to find out every potential avenue that's available to finance this deal. And if you
That's
have
right.
to speak, either you speak with 10 lenders or someone like yourself who can speak to 10 lenders and find out the options that are available, because that eliminates an enormous impediment to the deal. And
That's right.
so the ones that
Mhm.
offer 3 years, well, get them the 3 years tax returns. The ones that'll do a year plus a current year, whatever their criteria is, have the information available and get it to them, because you're more readily prepared when the right buyer
Mhm.
shows up and say, hey, here's the options that are available for financing. I've already got your lender lined up for you, or here's
That's
your
right.
choice. So, you know, I think back to David's point is part of that due diligence is getting lenders in place and
Thank
early
you.
on.
Yeah. I'd like to share an experience of a deal that just closed and funded last week. A buyer that came to me, there were some new SBA SOP policy changes that are more lenient. I won't get into all of what it was. We'll save that for another episode. But the SBA made some processes more lenient for the business buyers to get a loan. But guess what? Banks don't have to approve what the SBA is saying is more lenient. They can say no, even though the government
Right.
says that's okay. We're not okay with that. So this particular buyer and broker kind of box themselves into that referred lender to do the financing, and that lender said no. we we don't like the new SBA SOP policy. So the broker's like, well, shit. Now what do we do? Well,
Right.
the broker made the mistake getting hungry for additional incentive to be paid by that lender. That lender said no. The buyer's like, well, now what do I do? I trusted you, business listing broker. That didn't work out. They contacted me because I can just pick up the phone and talk to decision makers quicker than any business buyer ever can, or business broker, because the people I work with trust me that I know what I'm doing. And I'm not trying to have a big head here, but
No, we have the relationships.
I've gone through the fire.
Yeah.
I've gone through I've made mistakes and I've learned from them. So the message here is, when the deal got to me, I contacted Richard 3 lenders. 2 said no to the new SBA SOP policies, and 1 said yes. And I made my partner lender, God bless him, because I will send him more business. I said, take it to your decision maker and confirm it for me.
Right.
I couldn't even trust him, because why? All the other banks said no. I'm
Right.
like, please take it to your decision maker, because it was a substantial business acquisition. He got the green light and we funded the deal last week.
That's great. Well
But
done.
that's crazy though. That's why business brokers really need to understand boxing themselves into just one preferred lender because they want to get paid a referral fee for sending a buyer to that one lender could risk the sale. Period.
And you know what? And chances are, I don't know what the referral fees are. I'm assuming that I remember years ago they were like 1%.
They're
I'm not.
up
I'm
to
not sure. Are they?
anywhere from 1 to 2% of the buyer's loan amount.
Okay,
The
so even
broker
on a
gets.
buyer's, let's say on a buyer's loan amount, it's $1 million deals. You know, at 1.5%, they can make an extra $15,000. Typically, on $1 million deal, the commission is 10%. You know,
Mhm.
let's say it's not that, it's 5. So they're making $50,000, and they're getting busy, stuck. They're getting all hung up for $10 or $15,000. You know, I think a broker is much better off to approach it like a shotgun and say, here are all the lenders. Yeah, great. If you can get paid for it, great. But you shouldn't be doing a disservice to any of the parties in the deal because you have a preferred lender. I don't care what, I understand people want to make a living, but a broker shouldn't be looking at the financing piece of the deal as income. They should be looking at that as facilitation. And so, if you have a deal that can go the route of third party financing, non-seller financing, here we're talking about SBA, then
Mhm.
speak to as many lenders as possible. Someone like yourself who can speak to as many lenders as possible. And to the earlier point that we talked about, give the buyer some options. In that question, if you go to the title of our show, friend or foe, in that case, if the broker is not putting this out to a bunch of lenders, then that becomes a foe. And even
Right.
from a broker's perspective, it's just dumb business. I don't care what, and I'm not even going to couch that by saying, with all due respect to business brokers, because there's not much respect on that point, which is it's dumb business. Don't
Yeah.
focus on having to make money from the financing part of the deal. Get the deal done. The goal is to get it to the finish line. And so,
Mhm.
and the money is inconsequential relative to the commission that's earned. And
Mhm.
so, giving people more options, you have a much better chance of getting the deal closed. I mean,
That's
it's
right.
just good
Yeah.
business. It's just good business.
And I would love to add here too, as far as brokers being a foe, where they can go wrong, and I say this in a way to try to help them get better at what they're doing, um, is talking to the business buyer as if they are the SBA lender and telling them what they believe to know is what SBA and or the bank can do. As I
Right.
was mentioning earlier, every bank and non-bank lender has their own policies. So for a business broker who is representing a business listing to be talking SBA policy to a business buyer, that's being a foe. That's not being a
Right.
friend.
Right. Right.
So
Because to your earlier point, where
yeah,
the SOP that they have on their website could be different, as you said, with an individual lender. So you
that's
can
right.
outline, here's what
Mhm.
it may look like, but you got to get them in front of the right people.
Mhm. That's right. And I did a post earlier this week about a pinball machine. How the good old, remember the pinball machines,
Of
Richard?
course, I remember the pinball
Oh, I
machine.
love them.
My oldest friend, who
Shake
Howie
it.
Peart, who sometimes listens to these shows, he was the pinball wizard where we grew up.
Oh, I
Yes,
love pinball
yes, boom,
machines.
boom, yes,
But business buyers are that silver shiny ball in that
yes.
pinball machine, and they're just boom, ding, 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 ding. They're getting hit by all these people with cooks in the kitchen with their advice and stuff. Slow down, make sure who you're working with, the advice. What is the mission behind the advice that's being delivered? What is the mission behind the advice? Right? Because
Right, absolutely.
everybody has a mission behind it all, and if you're not a licensed SBA lender, you shouldn't be talking about SBA policy. And if you don't work directly for the banks or know the bank's credit policies, you shouldn't be talking business acquisition credit policy. I shouldn't be talking about brokerage, what business brokers do for sellers. That's their lane, that's their licensing, that's their business. I stay in my lane. If we all stay in our lanes, oops, I just lost an earring. If we all stay in our lanes, we get to our destination faster.
Usually, and
Mhm.
and the other, the double click from that is, well, let's see that, Aaron. Yeah, you got it on. You're good. Okay.
I
And
do. I do.
and the double click to that is, buyers need to be better educated on their own.
Yeah.
You have these, let's say this deal team. So you have a buyer, you have a seller. Each party has an attorney, an accountant. There's often a broker in the deal. I've been teaching and preaching this for 30 years. A buyer needs to get educated. You can't be
Mhm.
relying on everyone. Yes, you need professional advice from the attorneys and accountants, and the broker plays their role. But if you don't know what you're dealing, you can't be relying on everybody else to get through this process, to understand what comes next, to understand what you're supposed to be doing, to know how to identify the right business for you, to know how to negotiate, to know how to value a business, to know how to prepare for and conduct your due diligence. You have the assistance of lawyers and accountant, and a broker plays a role. But if a buyer is not educated, if they don't understand the steps in the process, what they need to know, what they need to do, and how to do it, it doesn't matter how good or how bad the other parts of the deal team are, they're not buying a business. It doesn't happen. It's not going to happen. And that's why its figures are so dismal. And so getting educated, you want to have, believable parties that you consult with that can help you along the way, but you are required. You've got to educate yourself. If not, you don't know who to believe or what to believe.
Yeah. Great segue for your top 10 things that sellers won't tell you. Maybe Sia can put that up for our listeners.
Oh, right. Yes, of
for
course.
hanging in there with us.
Come on,
here.
drum roll, Sia.
Yeah.
If Sia's still around, there should be a drum roll. We have a report, the 10 things a seller won't tell you. So I'm not sure if Sia's tied up with something. Here he is. You can get it for with that QR code, or go to richardparker.com. And on the first thing you see when you land on it is a field to plop in your email address, and you'll get sent a link to download the report. And it'll really take you through various steps in the process, various parts of the process where sellers won't disclose what is necessarily the real truth. And that also includes from a financing perspective. And there's some significant comments and very helpful comments from Deb related to the financing. So urge you to read that. It's a pretty comprehensive report. I think it's about 40 pages, but it's, you've got 30 years worth of know-how and a lot of experience from the deal business, and then the world of doing deals that'll be very helpful to buyers.
You took the line right out of my mind. I was thinking 40 pages of 30 years of experience of business buying and business selling. That's
business
Richard
lending.
Parker. That's Richard Parker. I'm right behind you, though.
You're there. You're there. Absolutely, 100%. You're there.
How about a quick thank you to our sponsors? We'll go through this fast. Brilliant Beam Media. They are the tech team behind the show here, making sure things run properly and no gremlins steal our show. Thank you, Brilliant Beam Media. Sia, you are fantastic. We love you. Hounds of Business Community. That's another sponsor of our show. If anybody is listening to the stream right now, whether live or future recordings, please visit Mike and take a copy of that QR code and join a group of small business owners and just professionals in general that are all in it to lift each other up towards success. You will find that LinkedIn is a great platform, but there's 9 billion users and 9 billion members. You have to join sub communities to grow those relationships, and the Hounds Business Community is a beautiful place to do that. And then my other sponsor that we have for the show here would be Walking Tall. They are a great group that are helping create mental health awareness. It's the Walking Tall movement. Please take a picture of that QR code and follow this group, because they are making some amazing changes in mental health awareness when it comes to just things in life that are unexpected, such as massive shootings that come out of nowhere, job losses. I mean, you name it. There's a lot of things that can happen to good people. And Walking Tall is a movement where we all pull together to support each other and lift one another up. I have to say a big shout out to a lot of the folks that added some comments here.
Yes.
Raquel, she's got a great show every Saturday morning. The Raquel Flores Connection Corner on Saturday mornings, I believe 10 a.m. Central Standard. Really great community to follow her live show. David Munoz, thank you for joining us again. I remember you were here last week asking some really great questions. Randy House, you are awesome. Your butt nuggets on LinkedIn are incredible. Thank you. And anyone else that maybe didn't leave a comment, we really appreciate your support. If you visit Richard's YouTube channel or mine, liking our episode or subscribing to our YouTube channel is really helpful to help us get these messages out to the mass.
Yes.
Yeah. And what do we got here? Richard and Mike. Oh, look at this. A Canadian biz can access your services. Oh, Well, I personally only work with U.S. businesses because the SBA is an affiliate of the government, the U.S. government. So I only work on financing U.S. based businesses and U.S. citizens to buy those businesses. Richard, you might be able to help worldwide for those that want to buy a business, right?
Yeah, buy or sell. I'm actually working with a client right now in Toronto, and have one of my largest client bases is actually in Alberta, Canada. I have a client there. His name is Iggy Domagalski. He's bought 10 businesses and generated over $200 million in revenue. He's probably sent me, I don't know, 150 clients over the years. So that certainly, and I do some work in Europe as well. So if anyone, whoever posted that question, if you go to the website, richardparker.com, go to the contact page. And if you have a question specifically for me, just put in there to please forward it to me, and I'll happy to, if I can help you, I'll help direct you to someone who can. I'm looking at the comment from Raquel Flores, and I just had to have a laugh because she said, "Hello, my OG," which I know she's referring to you. But Devin Craig, I'm not sure if he's on this call. He's with Peterson Acquisitions. He happens to be a terrific business broker. Definitely one of the good guys. Anything that we said negative or where brokers fall short, he's on the opposite side of that. Very impressive guy. So any buyers or sellers, should get in touch with him. But he had sent a comment in related to a video that I was on a while back, and he said something about Richard Parker, the OG. I thought it meant the old guy. Okay, I didn't realize. Okay, so when I got in touch with him and I spoke to him for the first time, he said, "What's this with the old guy?" He said, "No, it means the original gangsta." I said, "Okay." So you're being called the OG, which is a nice compliment, Deb, from Raquel. And thank you,
Well, that's
Raquel,
sweet.
for posting that.
Speaking of acronyms, for the longest time, I never knew what capital L, capital F, capital G stood for. You ever see LFG with an exclamation point?
LFG. Does not laugh out.
No. Actually, let's see you say it because I don't want to get in trouble. Isn't it let's F and go?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah,
Okay,
that's right.
yeah.
And as a hockey player and a big fan, I should know that because when guys score a goal, or in football, you see it very often, where someone scores a touchdown or a goal scored, and that's exactly what comes out of their mouth. So LFG, but just LFG till next week. Have a
Right
happy New
on.
Year, Deb.
Oh my goodness. Happy New Year, Richie. LFG. I love that, Raquel. Thank you. And all of you, you're such wonderful supporters. Next week, we'll be back 2 p.m. Eastern live. I forget what our topic is. Anybody remember?
That's not the sim. I'm not sure, but we got lots of them. So we have topics for about the next 12 years. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what next week's is, but I'm sure, as usual, Deb, you will be phenomenal and helpful to everybody.
And likewise. All right.
Thank you.
Well, everybody, thank you for your support.
Thanks, guys.
See you next week, Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern. We are
Happy New Year.
Happy
Out
New
of here.
Year.
Bye. LFG. See you later.